when God put in my heart an insatiable desire to read His Word, and that daily reading of God's Word has shaped who I am. And every day on Exploring the Word, Bert Harper and I teach the Word so that fire and love for Scripture will be in your heart as well.
Exploring the Word, weekday afternoons at 3 Central on American Family Radio.
This idea that one magic law is going to stop the next one from happening, it's not. If you think there's some magic unicorn law that's going to stop it from happening, just keep in mind that he violated probably dozens of laws already, including murdering people.
So let's stop lying about this. The calls you're hearing today for gun control have nothing to do with protecting Americans from violence.
Let's have a conversation about this right now.
When's the Republican Party going to wake up and realize that it has blood on its hands?
If somebody's mentally ill, they should not have access to a gun.
Let's talk about that 19-year-old carrying an AR-15.
They call it gun control, but it's not. It's people control.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome to this free-for-all Friday edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio Network. And boy, are you going to have a lot to talk about today on Free-for-all Friday. I got breaking news. We're going to postpone the Bible study and prayer to the top of the second hour because we want to deal with this news as it's breaking as we speak. And it has to do with Rod Rosenstein, the Assistant Attorney General. Or is he Assistant Attorney General or Deputy Attorney General? So
yes.
And he came out today and announced that there are an indictment of 13 Russians. This is all part of this Trump-Russia collusion probe. 13 Russians have been indicted. They've been indicted for things like wire fraud and bank fraud, aggravated identity theft. And the stated goal was spreading distrust toward the candidates and the political system in general. With me here is Fred Jackson, who is our news director here at One News Now, American Family News. So, Fred, welcome to the program, first of all, to the studio.
Good to be here. You know, this is the kind of stuff that they make movies about, you know, the kind of deep state things, governments trying to disrupt what's going on in another country.
Yeah, this is like 3 days of the Condor and all the president's men and all rolled into one.
But an important development, I always say to the guys in the newsroom, never go asleep on a Friday afternoon because you never know what's going to happen. So here's what we have. News conference just wrapped up with the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein. We have 13 Russians who are now indicted, plus 3 associated Russian entities, they're calling them. This goes back, according to this indictment, this goes back to 2014. And that's when a very elaborate scheme was put together by a group of Russians that eventually apparently employed well over 100 people in a Russian city. Apparently the mastermind behind this, according to the indictment, a company was set up called Internet Research Agency, and it was funded by Yevgeny Prigozhin, I probably have murdered that name, a St. Petersburg, Russia businessman dubbed Putin's chef because his restaurants and catering businesses once hosted the Kremlin leaders' dinners with foreign dignitaries. So I assume he's one of the guys that's mentioned in this indictment. So basically they set up and they started to create through basically social media, Facebook, Twitter, and all of these sorts of things, began to create false entities to start talking about American politics, American politicians, etc., etc.
Now it says here, Fred, 5 of the defendants charged with aggravated identity theft. Now I don't know how that is distinguished from regular old identity theft, but apparently it's worse. So they were apparently engaged in identity theft to kind of conceal the fact that when they went online or got involved in social media, or maybe they went out and purchased commercials, purchased ad time.
All of that is true. Apparently, and
people would have no idea that they were dealing with a false identity.
They, to a certain extent, part of the operation was to cover their tracks because, according to Rosenstein, several of these Russians came to the United States and they set up kind of phony entities, companies. And then they started to try to contact various campaign people and we'll work with you and all of that sort of thing. There was apparently one worker for the Trump campaign based in Florida. But there are two important things that Rod Rosenstein said today. He said no American citizens were aware they were dealing with Russians. No American citizen aware. Number two, the indictment says there is no indication whatsoever that the operations of these Russians, these Russian entities, had anything to do, had any impact at all with the outcome of the 2016 election.
So let's double back to the first thing, that there's no American that knew they were dealing with Russia.
Correct.
So no American, that would, I presume, include members of the Trump campaign team. If any of them somehow were connected to this or got contacted and responded,
yes,
they would not know that they were dealing, and especially if they're involved in identity theft, they may think they're dealing with an American, a legitimate source.
Oh, absolutely. So this is what Robert Mueller is saying. So this goes right to what Democrats have been charging now for months and months and months, that there was collusion. At least according to this indictment, what Mueller is saying, there is absolutely no proof of that. No proof whatsoever.
Yeah.
To go to the point that it was, in general, the goal was confusion, Rosenstein just said early in 2017, so I'm not sure if it was before Inauguration Day or after, on the same day in New York City, these guys, these Russians, orchestrated a pro-Trump rally, but on the very same day, they also organized an anti-Trump rally. So this is the power, the extent of this whole Russian operation. But they were certainly showing in that instance they didn't have a preference for. In fact, there was some indication that they tried to throw support behind Bernie Sanders. So this is what they're up to. And this comes very clear in the indictment. It was about sowing confusion. It wasn't about helping Donald Trump. And certainly, according to Rosenstein, no American citizen knowing they were dealing with Russians.
So it has 13 Russians. These are the three entities which you assume these would be the key players.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd think now that we're dealing with the heart here, the core, the kernel, the center core of whatever it is that Russia was trying to do in this election. If there are other Russians that were involved in some way, if there were other entities that were involved, we don't know anything about that. They didn't say anything about that. So perhaps there's something out there that we don't know, but the appearance that I get from this is what Russia was doing. This is the heart and soul of what they were trying to do, which means the whole idea that Trump campaign was colluding with Russia, that's out the window. That's gone. That is toast. And the whole idea that the Russians were specifically trying to help Donald Trump, again, that's toast, because they're out there trying to apparently help Bernie Sanders at the same time. You know, I saw some speculation that perhaps they were picking whatever they were doing to help Trump on one case and oppose him on another, is they figured Trump would be a source of the greatest unrest to the Republican political system, and Bernie Sanders would throw the biggest wrench into the Democratic machine. So that's the reason they were working whatever they did to help those candidacies. That was just to create a ruckus, just to create unrest, to create instability. You know, like the indictment says, the goal of spreading distrust towards the candidates and the political system in general. So the Russians were interfering, they were meddling in the election, but the goal wasn't to boost Trump, it was to hurt everybody.
That's right.
That's what they were up to.
Yep, that's it exactly.
All right. Anything else, Fred? We got about 30 seconds before we're done with this segment. Anything else to add before
You may remember earlier this week there was talk and admission that the Russians were trying to interfere with the upcoming election this year. And so it just goes to what they're saying, that this organization by the Russians, very sophisticated, and they thought they could get away with it again in 2018.
Yeah. All right. You know, and specifically, one of the specific allegations was one of these rallies, they were trying to we'll get back to this, but they were trying to undercut Trump's presidency after he was inaugurated.
Yep.
We'll be right back. Stay with us.
I've been an advocate for biblically responsible investing for many, many years, 30 years, because I'm an advocate for permanent income. This is Dan Celia from Financial Issues. I remember having two sisters that had trust funds that I managed. They were family trust. They were the third generation. They were in their 80s. They had more money than you could shake a stick at. They didn't want for anything. And even them, at one point in time, said to me, do we have enough income to pay our bills, our electric bill? That's all they cared about. I'm telling you, you're going to get to that point. So it's not an investment. It's a gift. It's permanent income.
Find out about charitable gift annuities when you call 800-326-4543, extension 345. 800-326-4543, extension 345. Or by visiting afafoundation.net.
Claiming to be wise, they became fools. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Corner. One of the greatest casualties of the trans insanity movement is the recognition and celebration of women and girls as a meaningful expression of the Imago Dei. Case in point, the PS 65 Elementary School in New York has canceled their annual father-daughter dance, all in the name of political correctness. Though there weren't any complaints from parents or students at the school, State Department of Education bureaucrats required the event be shut down. Elementary school girls were denied the chance to dance with their daddies, all in the name of political correctness.
Listen to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays from 5 to 6 p.m. Central on AFR. For more from Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, and welcome back to Free for All Friday on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name, congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent as always. The program is Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio. You are going to get the straight scoop here. We're not going to sugarcoat anything. We're not going to feed you fluff. There's no ethanol in the fuel here at Focal Point. It is going to be straight high-octane jet fuel. Off to a running start today with this breaking news that Robert Mueller has handed down, and Rod Rosenstein either announced it or maybe he's the one that handed down the indictments. But Rod Rosenstein, Deputy Attorney General, announcing that they have issued 13 indictments against Russians for trying to interfere in the 2016 election. Now, their efforts started back in 2014. There apparently was a time, and they were just trying to figure out, where can we create the most unrest? Where can we create the greatest disturbance? They weren't looking to help anybody or hurt anybody. They were just looking, who can we either oppose or get behind that will do the greatest damage to the American electoral system. That was their goal. That was their agenda. That was what was driving all of their decision making. So in other words, if they provided some help along the way to Donald Trump, it wasn't because they wanted to help Donald Trump. It's because they thought that if his campaign started to pick up some energy, that would do more to destabilize the American political system than any other candidate in the race. There was a time when they were looking very closely at Marco Rubio, looking very closely at Ted Cruz, because that these guys were the closest we've got to outsiders that could come in and really shake this place up. And then as Trump began to hang around, began to win some primaries, apparently they decided, no, we think that Trump, if we want to get behind somebody that's going to do the greatest damage to the political system, we think it's Donald Trump. And then they were also out there boosting Bernie Sanders. You know, because Bernie Sanders was the outsider He was the socialist. He was the one that they thought was going to be able to create the most unrest on the Democratic side of the ledger. Remember, the only way Hillary won that primary was that the Democratic Party rigged it for her. I mean, poor Bernie had no chance at this deal. It was all rigged with superdelegates and all that kind of business. So Hillary Clinton was a shoo-in to get the nomination. Now, the Russians didn't know that, so they're just playing the cards as they're dealt and think, well, Bernie Sanders is the guy. Let's throw some influence and some effort Bernie Sanders' way because he'll create some ruckus in the American political system on the Democratic side, and that's all we're interested in. Then, after Donald Trump won, then after the election, they turned their energies toward trying to harm Donald Trump as the president-elect, to try to undercut him and undermine him. So once again, their purpose, you'd think if their purpose was to help Donald Trump get elected, that they'd be on the bandwagon after the election, doing what they can to boost his image in the eyes of the American people, get his favorable numbers up. They weren't. They were doing exactly the opposite. They were working basically, who knows if they coordinated. That'll be interesting to find out as more information comes out. If they were coordinating their efforts with any Democrat organizations who were likewise trying to make trouble for Donald Trump. But the Russian government was actively involved in trying to create unrest to undermine and undercut the Trump presidency. This is after the election. So a lot of stuff coming out, 13 indictments. No Americans, remember, were involved in this. No Americans were aware of the identity of these Russians. They were using false identities, fake identities. They engaged in aggravated identity theft. So apparently they targeted and stole identities that would be believable, would make them believable as Americans, to, again, conceal the fact that they were working for a foreign entity. So we'll keep an eye. Fred Jackson's going to keep an eye on this as the story develops. This is a huge story. And again, it's starting to blow the whole Trump-Russia collusion thing completely out of the water, because what Rod Rosenstein said today, look, no American had any idea what was going on here. So there was no active collusion, knowledgeable collusion, between the Trump campaign and the Russian government. If anybody kind of accidentally helped because they got duped by somebody under this identity theft business, and they provided some assistance or responded to their phone calls or gave them some information or whatever, that's hardly collusion, because they had no idea. They thought they were dealing with an honest broker if they got involved. No, we don't have any idea if any of them responded to an overture, responded to an email, sent any kind of overtures in return. We just don't know that at all. But Rosenstein's point is, if any of that happened, there was no collusion on the part of the Trump campaign, because no American got sucked in to this deal. No American knew that they were dealing with Russian agents and agencies. So we'll see as this develops. And Jeff, I know you're keeping an eye on things over there. If you come across anything that'd be interesting, pop it in here. All right, a couple of quick things before we go to other content. You remember that everybody was writing an epitaph for Donald Trump with the Wall Street plunge that dropped like 1,600 points in 2 days, and they were writing Donald Trump's obituaries, flame out, crash and burn. That whole economic renaissance was just a mirage. Stocks, here's a headline from MarketWatch.com. Stocks close higher for the 5th straight session as Dow reclaims the 25,000 level. So the Dow's back to 25,000 for the first time in nearly 2 weeks. I think the high water mark was a little over 26,000, so they're not that far from the high water mark. You might have heard about the discussion. There's some evidence that Donald Trump's endorsed this idea of raising the gas tax, the federal gas tax, from 18.4 cents a gallon up to 25 cents a gallon. Now, the problem with that, that if they raise this gas tax, so that's a 25-cent tack on to every gallon of gas you buy, every single gallon of gas you buy, the federal government is going to force you to pay an extra 25 cents, and they're going to grab it. And ostensibly, it's to be used for transportation, for roads and bridges and freeways and all that kind of stuff. But the problem with that, for Donald Trump's sake, is that this would erase 60% of the benefit of the tax cut. In other words, it doesn't do any real good for the American people if you lower their taxes over here by X amount and then you turn around and raise them over here with the gas tax. So that's the thing everybody's got to be aware of. If this gas tax increase goes into effect, it will negate 60% of the tax cut benefit that Donald Trump already gave us. So we'll see where all of that goes. Now, talking about this Russian conspiracy theory and all that kind of stuff. Remember, that thing is just kind of falling apart by the day here. But we've got more information about Bruce Orr. We've talked about some of this before, but just to tack some of this down, Bruce Orr is a Department of Justice guy. He was actively involved in evaluating this dossier, actively involved in disseminating the Steele dossier that made it look like Trump was cavorting with prostitutes in Moscow and colluding with Russians all over the place. It turns out that he did not disclose to the FBI that Fusion GPS was paying his wife, his own wife. Her name is Nellie, I believe. His own wife was working for the company that was providing all of this dirt on Donald Trump. His own wife was being paid by that firm to dig up dirt on Donald Trump. Now, there's an obvious conflict of interest issue here. Obvious conflict of interest. No question about it. If he is part of the group that's trying to make trouble for Donald Trump, and his wife is working for this independent organization over here, and she's being paid to do it, and her objective is exactly the same thing, and her husband is using information that they supply to make trouble for Donald Trump, that is an obvious conflict of interest. Now, it turns out that there are very severe penalties for government employees, especially in something like the FBI and the DOJ, if you do not report this potential conflict of interest. Doesn't mean you automatically have to recuse yourself, but you have to report if there is what even might be an apparent conflict of interest. Bruce Orr did not do that. Glossed over it, used vague terminology to evade, to avoid, to conceal the fact that his own wife was being paid to provide the information that he was using to make trouble for Donald Trump. So there was a willfully falsifying government ethics forms. That carries a penalty of jail time, and Bruce Orr could be looking at jail time here if he's tried and found guilty. So the DNC, and remember the FISA court never heard, the FISA court never heard from the DOJ that the DNC was funding the Steele dossier. They never heard that. All they heard about was Christopher Steele as the one who compiled it, a former respected agent for MI6 or MI5, whatever it is over there. That's all they heard about. They never heard that Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee was fronting all the money for that thing. They never heard that. You think they would have an interest in finding that out? Because there's obviously a clear conflict of interest, because that creates the possibility, at least, that the FBI and the Department of Justice are supposed to be these completely neutral government bodies working on behalf of the people, had sold themselves out to the Democratic Party to help the Democrat candidate and to hurt the Republican candidate. That would be a serious problem. That's why people are saying, this is a scandal that makes Watergate looks like somebody stole the vacation Bible school money out of the tip jar. That's what it makes that look like. So anyway, all of that is going on, circulating out there in the background. On the ethics form that Bruce Orr had to fill out for his wife, he identified her in 2014 and 2015 as an independent contractor earning consulting fees. And then in 2016, he added a new employer who paid her, quote, a salary, end quote, but her responsibilities were listed as a cyber threat analyst, and the name of the company, Fusion GPS, was nowhere mentioned in the form. And according to the Department of Justice, these financial disclosure reports, one of the purposes that they use these forms is to identify potential or actual conflicts of interest. I mean, there's conflict of interest stuff just screaming at you all over the place here. The law says that whoever knowingly and willfully fails to file information required to be filed on this report faces civil penalties of up to $50,000 and possible criminal penalties of up to 1 year in prison under the disclosure law, and possibly up to 5 years in prison under a different part of the federal criminal code. And here she was employed here by a company that clearly should have been identified by name. So Bruce Orr is in deep, deep trouble on this, ladies and gentlemen. Falsification of information can result in criminal prosecution. You know, and the founder of GPS, Simpson, he testified before the House in November. He conspicuously omitted the fact that he worked with Nellie Orr. We'll be right back. Focal Point, American Family Radio.
This is Dr. Richard Lamb, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. In our last two programs, we've talked about Washington and Lincoln as we celebrate President's Day this month. And we talked about how Abraham Lincoln really did distill the essence of the American experiment at Gettysburg. Lincoln declared, quote, that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that the government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth, end quote. Now we know from an eyewitness what the emphasis was in the last lines of that speech. Most often people today say, of the people, by the people, and for the people. But Lincoln, when he delivered the speech, said, government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. For President Lincoln and Washington before him, the people were sovereign, and the government gained its authority from the consent of the governed, not top-down government. It's important for Americans to remember this priceless national heritage as evidence abounds that Americans face a crisis of confidence in themselves, in their government, and in their future. It is time for Americans to look to their historical heritage as embodied in President Washington and President Lincoln, and remember that we are the ones who confer power on the government by our consent, and the government is there to serve us. This year we elect a third of the Senate, all of the House, and a good portion of our governors and state houses. We have the opportunity to remind our elected officials and those who would be our elected officials that they derive their authority from the people, that they can be replaced when they forget for whom they work, and it is government of the people, by the people, and for the people that shall not perish from the earth. May God bless America. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio. Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net.
Hi, and welcome back to Free for All Friday here on Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. You are listening to Focal Point, the home of high-definition radio, more content per cubic inch of air than any other place on your radio dial, assuming you still have a radio dial. Honored and pleased to welcome to our decision maker line Walker Wildmon. Walker is the assistant to the president here at the American Family Association. Walker, a pleasure to have you on the program. We have you by phone. What is this business? You got an office here in our building, and I'm talking to you on the phone. What is up with that?
Well, Brian, I'm on the road, and I'm headed to my first guided goose hunt in Arkansas. So I'm headed with some of my buddies from church, and we're headed on a hunting trip. So that's why I'm out of the office, but don't tell my boss.
Okay, now be careful, Walker. We did a story 2 weeks ago about a goose hunter.
That's right.
And this guy got knocked completely out. A goose fell out of the sky, landed right on his head, and knocked him out. So be aware of falling geese, Walker. That's my only word of advice for you.
Hard hats are required.
Yeah, you might want to wear a construction hat out there. Anyway, that's not the reason
I'll keep an eye out.
All right. Anyway, that's not the reason I brought Walker on the program. Walker has a new program here on the American Family Radio Network, and I wanted him to spend just a couple of minutes talking about it and tell us when it airs. So, Walker, what's the title of your program, the nature, and when does it air?
Yeah, the title of the program is Exposing Washington. It airs each Saturday afternoon at 2:30 Central on Saturdays. It's a 30-minute program, it's a cram-packed program, just like you were mentioning for your show, a lot of content for the amount of time. But each week I will take a topic and a subject out of Washington, D.C. in the news and I will dissect it and fill all of our listeners in on what's going on.
Well, I know one thing, Walker, that's a target-rich environment you're going after there. In fact, we've been spending the first half of the first hour of the program talking about this indictment against these Russians that Rod Rosenstein just announced today. Russians definitely trying to meddle in the 2016 election, but all they were trying to do was to make trouble for the American political system. So anyway, it's just another thing that you'll have the opportunity to dig into as time passes. Well, I want to just put a word of recommendation in for Walker. Walker is, to me, one of the brightest guys in the American Family Association network on our staff here. Very shrewd, very insightful guy, very knowledgeable, follows this stuff with a keen eye. I think you definitely benefit from catching his program at Saturdays at 2:30 Central Time right here on American Family Radio. Walker, anything else you want to add?
No, nothing else to add except for this weekend I'll be talking about the budgetary dysfunction. The budgetary dysfunction in Washington. I'll break that down. Whose fault is it? Who's responsible? And what can we do about it?
Well, you know, the question I had, Walker, when I first heard about the title of your program, Exposing Washington, man, a half hour a week ain't going to be enough time. So
Yeah, I've had listeners email in and say Walker needs an hour,
Yeah.
So we'll see where it goes, but I try to get the most content I can in those 30 minutes.
Okay, well, good for you, Walker. Appreciate that. Anyway, God bless you, my friend, and bring us back some gooses or geese or whatever they're called, and watch your head out there.
Be careful, Walker.
Yeah, that's right. All right, thanks, Walker.
Thank you,
Walker Wildmon, Assistant to the President here at American Family Association. New program, Exposing Washington, airs on Saturday afternoons at 2:30, and I guarantee you you'll be rewarded if you listen to that program. All right, let's get back to some of the other stuff that we were talking about here. More stuff that Judicial Watch has done a great job of digging into some of this stuff. This is a story that circulates back to the top of the heap here every once in a while. This has to do with the former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. That's Susan Rice. Her name keeps surfacing. And what Susan Rice is implicated in, what Judicial Watch is exploring, or no, this is Samantha Power. Sorry, my mistake. Susan Rice was Secretary, whatever she was. She wasn't Secretary of State. She was, whatever she was. She was a high-ranking Obama official. But Samantha Power was the ambassador to the UN. And remember in this FISA stuff, when the F in FISA stands for foreign. The I stands for intelligence. Foreign intelligence surveillance. That's what the S stands for. So the purpose of a FISA warrant is supposed to be to give you the legal authority from a FISA judge, a FISA court judge, to surveil a foreign individual because they're acting suspiciously. You think they may be acting as a foreign agent. You think their intentions toward the United States may not be honorable, so you want to surveil them. You got to go to a FISA court judge and convince them that there's something here that merits looking into. Now, in the course of doing that, you may coincidentally get some communications that involve an American who is communicating with this foreign individual. They may have an absolutely perfectly good reason for doing it. They may have no idea that this person is under suspicion of anything. So their identities, consequently, are supposed to be masked. They're to be concealed because there's no authority in the FISA court to surveil an American citizen. It's not there. It's for foreign surveillance. So you've got to keep the identity of these Americans that could be incidentally caught up in the surveillance. You've got to keep their names on the QT. And this Samantha Power, she went and unmasked over 260 persons in her last year as UN ambassador to the United Nations. 260. In fact, she was going at a clip that she made an unmasking request on an average of one for every working day in 2016, leading right up virtually to the day of Donald Trump's inauguration. So the question is, she's an ambassador to the United Nations. What does she need to know the identity of these Americans for? There's no logical reason for it. You can't possibly believe that all 260 of them were somehow betraying the United States of America. This looks like an obvious attempt to dig up dirt by surveilling Americans that were connected in some way with the Republican Party, connected in some way with Donald Trump. So I think if we find out who these people were, whose identity she asked to be unmasked. Remember, this is back at a time where you got the Obama administration. So it's very possible that she was unmasking and then illegally leaking the names of Trump team members that were caught up in this foreign intelligence gathering. Now, that would be an abuse, obviously, by the Trump administration. So we'll see where that goes. That's something to keep an eye on. Now, one of the developments that's very interesting here is I think we may be heading in the direction of General Flynn withdrawing his guilty plea and having a judge sign off on that. Remember, Judge Michael Flynn, he pleaded guilty, and what he pled guilty to was lying to the FBI. Did not plead guilty to any kind of collusion, any kind of conspiracy to work with the Trump campaign and the Russian campaign to influence the election. None of that kind of stuff. He was found guilty or pled guilty to lying to the FBI. And that might have even been a setup. They might have listened to some of his surveilled conversations with Sergei Kislyak, the Russian ambassador, and maybe caught him in some minor inconsistency. Maybe not even intentional, maybe not even willful. Said one thing to Kislyak, said another thing to somebody else. We got him. And then what they were doing is leaning on him real heavily. And remember, this is an expensive proposition. He's going up against all of the might, all of the power, all of the resources of the United States government. There's no way that one man whose only source of income for his whole career has been a military paycheck, even though he was a high-ranking military official, he's not going to get rich doing that. There's no way in the world he would have the financial resources to take on the entire federal government and to outlast them. So he was running out of money. He was going to go bankrupt. He was going to lose everything that he had. He wasn't going to be able to have anything for his family, and he finally said, okay, I'm just going to throw in the towel. They're making noises about going after my son. They might have even said to him, look, General Flynn, if you plead guilty to this, we'll let your son off the hook. We won't go after him, and we'll let you off the hook. And so Michael Flynn finally just pleads guilty to that just to make this thing go away. But here's the piece by Drew Angerer on dailycaller.com. Here's how it begins. Extraordinary manipulation by powerful people led to the creation of Robert Mueller's continuing investigation and prosecution of General Michael Flynn. Notably, the recent postponement of General Flynn's sentencing. This is something that's weird to a lot of people. His sentencing has been postponed, and the judge who was going to do the sentencing has been recused. He didn't recuse himself. Somebody recused him for him, made that decision for him. The recent postponement of sentencing provides an opportunity for more evidence to be revealed that will provide massive ammunition for a motion to withdraw Flynn's guilty plea and dismiss the charges against him. Now, the judge that accepted his guilty plea was Rudolph Contreras. He was suddenly, abruptly recused from the case. The likely reason is that Judge Contreras served on the FISA court, and he might have signed off on one of these 4 warrants that enabled them to surveil the Trump campaign, and they realized, look, if this comes out, this is going to be way bad for the Department of Justice. This is going to be way bad for everybody because it's going to look like the fix was in. So, Judge Contreras, you better step down. Now, the judge assigned to take Contreras' place is a guy by the name of Emmett G. Sullivan. This is what Angerer says about him. Sullivan immediately issued what is called a Brady order requiring Mueller to provide Flynn all information that is favorable to the defense, whether respect to guilt or to punishment. Today, Mueller's team filed an agreed motion to provide discovery to Flynn under a protective order so that it can be reviewed by counsel but not otherwise disclosed. Now, Angerer says, look, this development is huge because prosecutors never provide this information to a defendant before he enters a plea. And they've got this guy pleading guilty. Why would you ever give discovery to a client that's already admitted that he did what you're charging him with. The only reason you do that if it could be material to request to have his sentence overturned, to have his plea withdrawn, because the evidence argues so powerfully for his innocence that it needs to come forward. So again, Flynn may have an opportunity, and Judge Sullivan is the perfect judge, says Drew Angler, to decide General Flynn's motion. He has held federal prosecutors in contempt for failing to disclose evidence. He's dismissed the corrupted prosecution of Alaska Senator Ted Stevens and appointed a special prosecutor to investigate the Department of Justice. That independent counsel issued scathing findings about the Department of Justice.
Exposing Washington with Walker Wildmon.
So who is responsible for the dysfunction in Washington? That's what we're going to be discussing today.
We have become one of the most litigious societies on the planet.
The goal of this show is to bring clarity to the news coming out of Washington, D.C., and to expose the deception that has plagued our nation's capital for decades.
Exposing Washington.
Each Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Central.
On American Family Radio.
This is Steve Conover inviting you to listen to the Friends of Israel Today each week on this station. Here's our host and Bible teacher, Chris Katulka.
Hey everybody, the Friends of Israel Today is a unique radio show that teaches biblical truth for changing times. We do this through Q&A, timely interviews, dramatic readings from the life of Holocaust survivor Zvi Kalisher, and of course, Bible teaching.
To learn more, visit foiradio.org.
Join us for Friends of Israel Today, Sunday morning at 11:30 Central on American Family Radio.
8 Days of Hope has been around for 12 and a half years, and never did we expect to see a storm wreak havoc in a state like we did with Hurricane Harvey. This past year, for 7 weeks, 8 Days of Hope volunteers from around the world poured into Southeast Houston as we helped out thousands of families, gutting their houses, drying them out, treating them for mold, bringing them food, bringing them supplies, and now we're going back. That's where you and I get a chance to be the hands and feet of Jesus, and we want to invite you, your family, your loved ones, people that you hang out with, people you work with. 8 Days of Hope, 14, and our first ever back-to-back trip. That's right, 8 Days of Hope, 14 and 15, Southeast Houston from March 10th to March 24th. We're looking for skilled professionals, people who know how to work with their hands, and maybe they do this for a living. We're also looking for people that are less skilled, but are still looking to be a part of something way bigger than just themselves. Go to 8daysofhope.com for more information, 8daysofhope.com. Come be a part of the largest rebuilding trip ever planned by 8 Days of Hope.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio, Free for All Friday. Glad to take your calls about anything that's been in the news this past week. 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. This, by the way, is the only opportunity for phone calls today. We're donating the last half hour of our time today to a special broadcast featuring India Partners, give you another opportunity to participate with that ministry. That'll be the last half hour of the program. So we'll be signing off at 2:30 today. So it's your last opportunity, one opportunity, to make a phone call and give us your opinion. 888-589-8840. Give us a call and encourage the callers to make things brief and to the point. We'll get as many calls in this last segment as we can. Let's begin by hearing from Daniel in Cameron, North Carolina. Daniel, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hey, Brian, I tried to call you earlier this week, got cut off, but I wanted to kind of see if I could finish that.
Yeah.
Just assume that Hillary Clinton, Susan Rice, Loretta Lynch, James Comey, every one of them got sentenced to jail. What would the first liberal president do on day one when he took office? Would he not pardon them?
Well, you'd be surprised if he didn't. He'd accuse them of being a railroad job, victims of injustice. America's better than that. I have the pardon power, and I'm going to use it to get these innocent, darling lambs off the hook. So I think you're exactly right. That would be one of the first orders of business. Let's go to Quinn in Olive Branch, Mississippi. Again, the number, 888-589-8840. One opportunity for phone calls today, free for our Friday. Let's hit it, 888-589-8840. Let's go to Quinn. Quinn, what's on your mind?
I just had a comment about Walter's hunting trip.
Yeah.
If he's having to take a guided goose hunt trip, he might not have to worry about a goose hitting him in the head because he has to actually shoot one for that to happen, right?
Well, I just hope for your sake, Quinn, that Walker's not listening to the program as he's on his way to the happy hunting ground. Well, I'll let him know that you said that if in case he didn't. So, actually, he's a pretty experienced bird hunter, so I'm guessing he'll probably have some success. But I don't know, going on a guided goose hunt. I mean, it's kind of like having a guide when you go play golf. What do you need a guide to go play golf?
I don't know.
What, you go on a goose hunt, you wait till they fly out, and then you shoot them.
I've been on a guided duck hunt before, and if you're hunting an area that you've never been before, it's a big asset.
Okay.
They can put you right in where the ducks, they do it for a living, and they put you in on the ducks, and I'm sure he'll have geese on top of it.
Yeah. All right, well, good enough, Quinn. Appreciate the call, and Walker does too. I'm quite confident. Let's go to Clifton in Bluefield, Virginia. Clifton, welcome. What's on your mind?
Yes, Brian, I'd like to make a comment about this terrible shooting, again, tragedy in Florida.
Yeah.
It seems to me like everybody wants to beat around the bush. You know, I graduated from school in 1969. We never heard of anything like this back then. And why was that? Even though prayer had been took out of school and the Ten Commandments off the wall, a lot of the people still in the schools had been exposed to that. They remember that. And now, you know, everything, violent movies, violent video games, violent TV screens, you know, everything is violent. And, you know, it seems to me, it's amazing to me when we have a tragedy like this, they request prayers or our prayers are with you, but you can't mention God until a tragedy happens.
Yeah.
They need to turn this nation back to God. When God is forced out, there ain't but one person coming in, and that's the devil.
Well, and that's a good observation, Clifton. That's the point I made earlier this week. I made that point in my column. You know, in the nature abhors a vacuum, and the unseen world, the world of the spirit, abhors a vacuum. If you create a vacuum by dismissing God from your world, and believe me, God will leave. Yeah. He's a gentleman. He doesn't go where he's not wanted. You know, he'll leave reluctantly. You go back to Ezekiel when the Spirit of the Lord departed from the temple. It was one step at a time. He kept waiting for the people to come around to repent, turn in faith. They didn't do it, so he moved to the threshold. They still wouldn't do it. He moved to the top of the temple. They still wouldn't do it. And finally, his Spirit left. So it's reluctant, but he'll go. And so he got shoved out of our schools 1963. You know, and Clifton, I did some research on school shootings and school deaths prior to 1963 and after. Because you're right, there was a little residual momentum. Some spiritual capital had been built up from 1900 to 1963, and so we were still drawing down that capital for a decade or so. But there were 62 deaths in school shootings from 1900 to 1963. 62, about one a year. Since 1963, about the same amount of time, about 6 decades to today, 419 deaths in school shootings. So no surprise, exactly what Clifton is saying. If you create a vacuum, Satan is going to flood in to fill it. You know, and the point's often been made, I mean, I think G.K. Chesterton put it this way, that if you stop believing in God, it's not that you will believe in nothing, you will believe in anything. And that's where you get this flood of the corruption of culture and all this kind of stuff coming in. All right, very good call. Appreciate that. Let's go to Mary in Commerce, Texas. Mary, welcome. What's on your mind?
I have a question. The other day you mentioned, I believe you played a clip of a congressman saying there had been 19 shootings and it's only February.
Yes.
Does he mean there was 19 shootings this year alone?
Yeah, and that has been totally exploded. In fact, I got 2 stories here, Mary, about that very thing. You know, and you heard it all over the place. 18 school shootings this year. You know how many mass school shootings there have been this year based on FBI threshold, FBI quantifications? 1. For a shooting to qualify as a mass shooting, there have to be at least 4 deaths. And this is the only one this year that qualifies as a mass shooting, according to the FBI. So there have been 18 times where guns have discharged on campuses. That's what this group, it's called Everytown USA or something. They say anytime a gun has been discharged on campus, that counts as a shooting. So, you had this third grader, a special needs kid, and a police officer had come to the school. He was sitting there talking to the kids, and this disabled kid, mentally challenged kid, comes up behind him and pulls the trigger in his gun, which was in his holster. And it went off. Nobody got hurt. Bullet hit the floor. Everybody was fine. Another case in which a gun accidentally went off. A backpack was dropped. The gun accidentally discharged. Again, nobody hurt. Occasionally you have somebody will drive to a school parking lot, commit suicide there. And every town was counting those as school shootings. So that's a good call, Mary, and you're exactly right. There have not been 18 school shootings. This is the first mass shooting that qualifies according to the standards of the FBI. All right, appreciate that call, Mary. Good opportunity to provide some clarification. Let's go to Ralph in Culpeper, Virginia. Ralph, welcome. What's on your mind?
Brian, thank you for taking my call. I think you mixed some metaphors on the FISA warrant thing. My understanding is that a FISA warrant is required for the authorities to surveil an American citizen, but not a foreign agent. The unmasking has to do with American citizens who are incidentally surveilled while the authorities are surveilling their primary target being a foreign national, and the identity of the person on the other end of the line is masked. So I think that's my understanding, that the warrant requirement has to do with surveilling of American citizens, like Carter Page, for example. He's an American citizen. They needed a warrant to go spy on him, but I don't know that they would need a warrant to go spy on Russian nationals.
Okay, yeah, you're probably right. They may not need it for that. Well, that's a good question, Ralph. We'll see if we can get an answer to that question as the program develops. Appreciate the call. We'll see if we can research that. Thanks for the call. Let's go to Charles in Lewisburg, West Virginia. Lewisburg, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hey, Brian, just a lighter note. Have you seen the official Obama portrait? What an egregious laughter.
Charles, don't get me started on that.
That's just, I mean, it's just egregious.
Yeah, and it's amazing. And folks probably know what you're talking about. The official presidential portrait of Barack Obama and the official portrait of Michelle Obama. These are like hanging somewhere, some prominent portrait gallery. It's his official portrait. And a picture taken, it was a painting done where he's just up against all of these leaves like he's at Wrigley Field in right center field or something like that. And it turns out that the painting of the leaves is outsourced, that this painter, I forget his last name, Wiley Kinhindi or something like that, that painted it, he outsources a lot of his work. So there probably some Chinese artists that contributed to the official presidential portrait. And if you notice, look at the portrait carefully, he painted Obama with an extra finger. If you look at his left hand in the portrait, his hands are huge, number one, which might be a slight dig at Donald Trump. And number two, he's got an extra digit in there. His little pinky on his left hand is folded under his ring finger, but you can count them right there. And Michelle Obama's portrait, I don't get it. I mean, I don't want to be critical because I don't understand art. But to me, it didn't even look like her. And it looked very bland and kind of unintriguing as a portrait. So anyway, that's apparently they liked them. They oohed and ahed when they were unveiled. So apparently they're happy with them. And I guess in the end, that's really all that matters. All right, let's go to Bridget in Belton, Texas. Bridget, welcome. What's on your mind?
It's an honor to be on your program, sir, and I appreciate all of you that you do.
Thank you. Honor to have you on.
I just don't really feel comfortable with the Mueller indictment. For me, it doesn't pass the smell test. And I just have the feeling that it is a diversionary tactic to kind of placate people for all the craziness that's going on with him, and maybe to get us past the midterm elections. And then maybe his true intentions will come out.
Well, that's interesting, Bridget. You would suggest that, because there's been a lot of criticism of Mueller for producing nothing, and maybe they wanted to run some scalps out and figured, well, the American people can't complain if they're Russian scalps, so we'll trot these out and let the American people know we're getting something. You're getting something out of your millions and millions and millions of dollars and all these 16 high-priced attorneys getting paid $500-600 an hour. Here's what you're getting for your money. Thank you, Bridget, for the call. Focal Point, American Family Radio, back after the news. Dennis, hang on. I'll take you.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
Would you like to know how you can help the American Family Association celebrate our 40th anniversary? It's simple. All you have to do is purchase your very own In God We Trust poster. You can frame and display it in your home, office, classroom, or get permission to hang it in a public building. Help us remind America of our national motto. Order yours today at afastore.net. That's afastore.net.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News on the Hour, I'm Chris Woodward. The Office of Special Counsel Robert Mueller, who is leading the federal investigation into alleged Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election, has announced a grand jury in the District of Columbia has indicted 13 Russian nationals and 3 Russian entities who were accused of violating U.S. criminal laws in order to interfere with the 2016 U.S. presidential election. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who is overseeing the investigation, said the operation's stated goal was, quote, spreading distrust toward the candidates and towards the political system in general, end quote. He said the defendants allegedly bought space on U.S.-based computer servers in order to conceal their Russian origins, and they impersonated Americans on hundreds of social media accounts.
They used stolen or fictitious American identities, fraudulent bank accounts, and false identification documents. The defendants posed as politically and socially active Americans, advocating for and against particular candidates. They established social media pages and groups to communicate with unwitting Americans.
The indictment charges all defendants with conspiracy to defraud the United States. It charges 3 of the defendants with conspiracy to commit wire fraud and bank fraud, and 5 of the defendants with aggravated identity theft. For more details on this story, visit our website, onenewsnow.com. President Trump is heading to the Florida city where a school shooting rampage took place this week. Fox's John Decker is at the White House with more.
The president following up on his pledge to visit Parkland, Florida, the grieving community dealing with the aftermath of Wednesday's mass shooting. The president writing on Twitter, I will be leaving for Florida today to meet with some of the bravest people on earth, but people whose lives have been totally shattered. Democratic Congressman Ted Deutsch, whose district includes Parkland, retweeted the president and wrote, yes, I am ready to welcome you to Parkland. I am ready to work with you to stop this, but the answer is not more guns. At the White House, John Decker, Fox News.
Meanwhile, an immigration reduction advocacy organization is pleased that the Senate failed to pass a bill that the organization feels would have made it impossible to deport virtually every illegal alien in the country. AFN's Chad Gerning reports.
The bill was one of 4 Senate proposals that failed to get the 60 votes necessary to pass. It was pushed by Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and 8 Republicans, and would have not only granted legal status to illegal aliens already in the country, but would have protected any illegal who manages to sneak in the country between now and June 30th. The president had threatened to veto the legislation. Chris Shemolinsky is director of content and activism at Numbers USA. He says we've seen this play out in the past.
First, you exempt all these people from removal, and then second, next will be give them all work permits, and third will be eventually to put them on a path to citizenship, give them a full amnesty.
And Shemolinsky says it is absolutely absurd that the bill would have allocated $25 billion for border security, including a wall, spread over the next decade.
It would be very easy for an administration, if Trump were to only be president for one term, completely dismantle it. Certainly a bad deal for America.
And Shemolinsky says this legislation would have done nothing to the diversity visa lottery or chain migration that Trump once ended. I'm Chad Groening.
2012 GOP presidential nominee Mitt Romney is running for the U.S. Senate in Utah. Romney officially launched his political comeback attempt Friday by praising his adopted home state as a model for an acrimonious national government in Washington. Having been one of the Republican Party's fiercest internal critics of President Donald Trump, Romney did not mention the administration or Trump himself in a campaign announcement posted online. The 70-year-old Romney will be the heavy favorite for the Senate seat being opened by Senator Orrin Hatch's retirement. In final news this hour, if you're stopping for gas this weekend, expect to pay a national average $2.54 a gallon. That's for regular grade. The national average this time last week was $2.59 a gallon. Find more news at onenewsnow.com.
You wish you could stop thinking about it, but you can't. It never quite leaves your thoughts. Even in the joyful moments, it's there. The sadness, shame, and sorrow. You know you can't go on like this, so don't. Phone the International Helpline for Abortion Recovery at 866-482-LIFE. Your call is confidential, and you'll be talking with someone who's already been where you are and found the way out. 866-482-LIFE.
This idea that one magic law is going to stop the next one from happening, it's not. If you think there's some magic unicorn law that's going to stop it from happening, just keep in mind that he violated probably dozens of laws already, including murdering people.
So let's stop lying about this. The calls you're hearing today for gun control have nothing to do with protecting Americans from violence.
Let's have a conversation about this right now.
When's the Republican Party going to wake up and realize that it has blood on its hands?
If somebody's mentally ill, they should not have access to a gun.
Let's talk about that 19-year-old carrying an AR-15.
They call it gun control, but it's not. It's people control.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to the second hour of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Programming, now remember, we're done early today, 2:30, special program. John Riley, a special program featuring our ministry alongside India Partners, another opportunity to financially support them. Remember, this is an organization that rescues kids from the red light district in Mumbai, gives them food, gives them room and board, gives them shelter, gives them medical care, gives them counseling, introduces them to Jesus Christ, gives them an education, and most of all, protects them and gives them a place of safety. You can help out at $7 a day. That's $50 will provide a whole week. $212 provides a whole month. $100 to provide 2 weeks of safety care and rescue. And I just want to thank you for your participation in the project up to this point. As of this morning, you all have provided 16,000 days of safety, rescue, and care for these vulnerable little children in Mumbai, India. So stay tuned at the bottom of the hour for that special half-hour feature program on India Partners. Now, a couple of quick things to follow up on. I did a little bit of research on the whole business of FISA warrants, and according to the information I've got in front of me, a FISA warrant is required to, or the FISA court oversees requests for surveillance warrants against foreign spies inside the United States. So it's specifically a warrant to surveil a foreign spy who is operating inside the United States. And of course, they may spend a lot of their time talking to each other. So it only may be occasionally that you incidentally capture communication from an American citizen, and that's why their identities have to be masked and can only be unmasked if you go to a federal judge. So that's the latest on that. Appreciate the call. Whoever the caller was that brought that up, appreciate that call because that gave us an opportunity to go in there and get that button down. Let's go to Dennis in Columbus, Ohio. Dennis, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me. Oh, well, Dennis, my bad. I can't talk to you unless I bring you in. Welcome, Dennis. What's on your mind?
Okay. Hey, thanks for taking my call, Brian.
Yes, sir.
When you're listening these indictments that they came out against those Russians, it sounds like the same thing that Fusion GPS, Agent Steele, the Hillary Clinton campaign, all those things sound like the same thing they were guilty of. you know, when you're talking about spreading misinformation, Russian stories, you had the liberal media posing as journalists.
Yeah.
You had the Russians posing as Americans. You had the FBI posing as an impartial law enforcement group. But another thing is, with this Flynn indictment, I've been thinking that Flynn is a victim of entrapment. And as being so, he might be able to sue the DOJ and the FBI just like they were able to sue the IRS.
Well, you know, you got a good point there, and I really hope Michael Flynn gets justice here. He needs it. Completely unfair, I believe, what has been done to him. Listen, I appreciate your call, Dennis. We've had other callers thinking the same thing, that maybe this is kind of cover, and maybe even if the indictments specify that no Americans were involved in this, no American knew that they were talking to somebody from Russia, and this is the whole kit and caboodle of the Russians. This is everybody from Russia that was involved in trying to meddle in this campaign. Then it's a way of letting Hillary Clinton and her crew off the hook. They can say, no evidence that Hillary was connected in any way to any kind of collusion with Russia. So that could be kind of the backstory here. That could be the ultimate goal. And also maybe to kind of call off the dogs who are getting restless because all this money is being spent. And so far, no evidence of any Trump-Russia collusion, which is the thing he was tasked with researching. And again, this doesn't even go to that issue, because what he found is there's no Trump-Russia collusion. This is what they discovered today. No Trump-Russia collusion. So even going after Russians who were meddling in the election, that's a little bit outside the purview, although you can see how it is connected. All right, you know, Jeff was pointing out that I got a troll on our Facebook page who I assume is a lesbian viewer, or at least sympathetic to the homosexual agenda, and she accused me of being nothing more than a Westboro Baptist Church fan. Remember the Westboro Baptist Church? That's that small kind of family, it just consists of family, immediate family virtually, small church, and they actually believe that God hates homosexuals. And so they will protest all over the place that God hates homosexuals. They'll go to military funerals, and they'll wave their God hates, you know the word they use begins with F, God hates homosexuals, only they use the F word for that. So they go around saying that God hates homosexuals, and we don't believe that. I don't believe that. I believe God loves homosexuals. I believe that God died for homosexual sinners just like he died for heterosexual sinners. I believe he wants homosexuals to come to faith in Christ. He wants homosexuals to know forgiveness. He wants them to know victory over sin. He wants them to know freedom from the things that have them in bondage. He wants them to have a relationship with him, know his love and joy and peace. He wants them to spend an eternity with him and with other people who have found the same source of eternal life. That's what God wants. You know, the Westboro Baptist Church, they're more like Muslims. I mean, what does the Islamic faith want to do with homosexuals? They want to throw them off the top of 8-story buildings. We don't want to do that. We want to help homosexuals. Anyway, she was accusing me of being a Westboro Baptist Church type guy. I think I've told this story before, but I love telling this story because everybody thinks, you know, everybody in the media that's you know, that I haven't drawn as much attention lately, but when I was drawing a lot of attention, everybody was accusing me of being one of the 1 or 2 or 3 worst homophobes on the globe. And they would group me with Fred Phelps and that bunch out there. Well, this is interesting, is Fred Phelps brought his whole crew out to Boise when I was pastoring there. And they specifically targeted 4 churches that they thought were too gay-friendly for their taste. They targeted 3 liberal churches, and they protested in front of my church for being too pro-gay, being too gay-friendly. And that was the Westboro Baptist Church folks that were doing that. So just a word to our homosexual, pro-homosexual viewer. That's what the Westboro Baptist Church thinks of me. And you know now what I think of them. If you want to know how many homosexual viewers we have, well, maybe at least one. You know, maybe she's just friendly to the cause, but I know I've had interactions with others that are involved in the homosexual lifestyle. exchanges have always been kind. They've always been courteous. You know, we disagree about the acceptability of homosexual behavior, but nothing wrong with that. A disagreement is not hatred. You can be perfectly kind, perfectly accepting, perfectly respectable towards somebody with whom you disagree. Happens all the time, and that's what tolerance is really all about. I understand you have a difference of opinion with me. I'm probably not going to be able to convince you that I'm right, and you're not going to be able to convince me that you're right, but it doesn't have to stop us from being kind to each other and speaking civilly to each other and speaking courteously to each other and have an exchange of information and data points and exchange of points of view to see if we can contribute to a constructive dialogue. So disagreement, ladies and gentlemen, is not hatred. That's one of the main myths of the left. Focal Point American Family Radio will be right back with more content. Stay with us.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute.
A health plan executive thought he knew how hospitals worked until his father needed treatment for cancer. He then wrote about time wasted, disorientation, and stress. He wishes hospitals were built around patients, that there were patient docking stations where everyone came to the patient, and he wants a care coordinator to make it run smoothly. Hospitals aren't built for patients because patients don't pay the bills. How would that change if much of our healthcare dollars were no longer used to satisfy the government agencies and health plans that do pay the bills? This man wants to redesign hospitals, but he first might want to tackle the problem of third-party payers.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly E-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
Hey, my name's Brant. You ever make a change and then wonder, why didn't I do this a long time ago? That's what's happening for thousands of people with regard to their health care. They're joining Medishare, and then they're wondering, why didn't I already do this? For most members, it costs less than half what they were paying for their old health plan. There's a huge provider network, too. You can customize your plan, and this is awesome. Medishare members can go online with a doctor 24/7. So if you need a prescription for the flu or something, it's so convenient for you and your family. So yeah, this is one of those why did I wait on this things. And if you don't love your current health plan, you're not stuck with it. You can join Medishare anytime. By the way, to give you an idea, the typical savings for a family, about $500 a month. It just makes so much sense. Check it out. They're super easy to talk to. Call 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point American Family Radio. Last segment of today's program. A couple of quick things. I got a column here, or an article here, about whether maybe viewers are suffering hate fatigue. You know, hate is a dark emotion. It's an angry emotion, and you cannot run an enterprise on hate. You can't run a radio program on hate. You can't run an organization on hate. It just gets wearisome after a while. It just gets burdensome, and it gets heavy, and it gets old. And people are tuning out CNN. Their viewership compared to last year has plummeted. They've lost 30% of their primetime viewers, 23% of their total day viewers. And this writer, John Nolte at Breitbart, thinking maybe their viewers just have hate fatigue. You know, you turn on CNN and it's nothing but bash Trump, bash conservatives, bash Republicans. Republicans are evil. Republicans are toads. Republicans are terrible. Republicans are hoopleheads. And people just they're just up to here with all of the hate. They're just fatigued with that. And it turns out that there's a video gaming streaming site called Twitch. It's a video gaming streaming site. They have 962,000 concurrent viewers compared to MSNBC's 885,000 and CNN 783,000. So CNN is being surpassed by a video game website. That's
one that we've never even heard of.
One I've never heard of that. So Michael Keaton went off. I was disappointed to see this. He's always been my favorite actor, frankly. But he went off on the NRA and Republicans, calling us weak, disgusting cowards yesterday. And he had some of these shootings where there were a lot of victims. You know, Virginia Tech and Sandy Hook, the Orlando Pulse nightclub, the Las Vegas attack, Sutherland Springs Church. And again, he's accusing the Republicans. These all happened because of the failure of gun control. Republicans are to blame because they don't believe in gun control. We got to have background checks. Remember that Bill Nelson from Florida? We got to have background checks. Well, in all but one of these, the only one of these shooters that did not pass a background check was the Sandy Hook shooter, the high school kid that stole the gun from his mom, who was a legal owner of the gun. And then he went to school and shot his classmates. So 5 of the 6, they passed a background check. So they were legal owners of their guns. And to boot, they were in a place that was officially classified as a gun-free zone. In fact, the suspicion is a lot of these shooters go to specifically to places that are gun-free zones because they know there's going to be nobody there to fight back. Now, save until Monday, one of the accusations out there, we talked about this accusation. This is the 18th school shooting. We blew that thing out of the tub. You probably heard a lot of screaming and moaning about how Donald Trump reversed the Obama decree that made it possible to keep guns out of the hands of the mentally ill. He did no such thing. What he did is repeal a Obama-era directive that required that people who need assistance taking care of their finances, so these older people that may want help or need help taking care of their financial matters, Obama decreed that they were to be declared as mentally ill and reported to this federal database and not allowed then to have guns. By the way, it's already against the law for, I don't know if they classified as people that are technically classified in the insanity category or just mentally ill. I don't know what it is, but there's already a law that people that are mentally ill cannot buy a gun. That law already exists. All right, well, let's, by the way, just a quick heads up. This is a story from L.A. Get ready, because this is where the environmentalists are going. They want to come after your hairspray and your paint. They have concluded that half of the petroleum chemicals that make up the smog in L.A. come from consumer products like soap. So they're realizing, cars have become clean burning. Gasoline has become clean burning. They're improving the mix and the fuel and improving the technology and engines and all that kind of stuff. So there's a limited targets out there. If you're still going to stick to try to demonize the automotive industry, they got to find new dragons to slay. And now they have settled on hairspray and paint and soap because they know that everybody in America has these things. They can demonize them as products that are destroying the environment and so be ready. They're going to start coming after you like they came after Freon back in the day.
Brian, they can have my hairspray.
Yeah, he's eco-friendly.
Yeah, Rob will donate his hairspray to the cause. Jeff Sessions said, look, we are going to end executive branch legal activism. Said that this morning. We're going to get rid of that. We're not going to do it. The Obama administration did that. Remember, they were going around the Constitution all the time. President Obama said, look, I can't do that. I'm not a king. I can't just do that because the Constitution restrains me. And then he'd turn around and go right out and do it. And Jeff Sessions, we're not going to do that in the Trump administration. And he was talking about the fact, this is something I hadn't thought about, but it's a great point he makes, that all of these federal judges that have overturned these immigration orders and immigration decisions and all that kind of thing, you have all these little tin pot guys. I mean, 4 of them got the guy out in Hawaii and the guy out in Seattle, and then this federal district judge, 4th Circuit, second time he's weighed in and canceled an immigration travel ban. And he says, look, we're at a point now, Jeff Sessions says, where I have to get 600 plus federal judges to agree with something we do, or we're stymied. That's not how the Constitution is designed to work. That's not how our country is designed to work. If any one of the 600 judges think that they can reverse anything that the federal government does, any decision that Donald Trump makes, even if constitutionally it's right in his wheelhouse, then we'll never get anywhere. So that's a very good point. Right now he's in a situation where 600, any one of 600 federal judges could completely shut down the whole Megillah. All right, let's see if we can squeeze in just a couple of sound bites here. Let's grab Whoopi Goldberg. This is clip R1, talking to Meghan McCain on The View. And listen to how quickly the producer shut Meghan McCain down when she starts complaining about the bias against conservatives. Let's listen.
And I think we're living in incredibly divisive times right now. We all know that. But I think as a Republican, I feel like sometimes liberals say, we need to be tolerant of everyone, we need to be tolerant of everyone, except pro-lifers, except Trump supporters, except gun owners, except for everyone in the red in the middle of the country.
I think I'm going to stop you because that's not actually true. And I don't want to, and I'm stopping you for a reason. I'm stopping you for a reason. Because we don't want to talk about liberals and what they're doing. Just because I'm trying to get out of this, because this is what they've asked me to do. So if you can do it sort of quickly.
So Whoopi Goldberg looking over her shoulder when she says, this is what they have asked me. The producers are yelling in her ear. You got to shut that woman down. She's talking about how liberals discriminate against conservatives and that's bias and that's bad. You got to shut her down, because the producers apparently telling Whoopi, look, we only want to talk about liberals here. If we're going to talk about liberals, we're only going to say positive things about them. Here, Meghan McCain is saying, look, they can discriminate against conservatives. They're tolerant toward everybody but conservatives. You got to shut that down right now.
What's funny about that, too, is right before that, they were just talking about how tolerant they were. They were defending themselves about how tolerant they were. But, okay, stop talking.
Yeah, but she pointed out that they're not tolerant toward liberals. Here's Mike Pence, clip number 1. Mike Pence was, remember, singled out by this group, The View, accused of being mentally ill, mentally disturbed, and all that kind of stuff, and Christianity being a form of mental illness. He responded here, clip 1.
I mean, my Christianity is the most important thing in my life. I try and start every day by opening the good book. My wife and I try and have a prayer together before I leave every morning. I can honestly tell you my faith sustains me in all that I do. And it's just a regular part of our lives. But I'm not unusual. I think I'm a very typical American. Whatever your faith tradition, people understand that. But I just think it demonstrates how out of touch some in the mainstream media are with the faith and values of the American people, that you could have a major network like ABC permit a forum for invective against religion like that. And I call them out on it, not because of what was said about me, but it's just simply wrong for ABC to have a television program that expresses that kind of religious intolerance.
Good for Mike Pence. Proud of him for doing that. One last thing before we're done here today. You know, a lot of people think that the cosmology of the Bible is antiquated, that we believe that there is this fixed vault above us, that the earth is sitting literally on these pillars, that the earth is flat, and that everything is kind of confined and it rests on these pillars, because those are figures of speech that some of the writers use. There's an old story about some ancient king wanted to know what holds up the earth. And his wise man said, well, the earth rests on the back of a giant turtle. And the king says, well, what does that turtle rest on? And he says, well, that turtle is resting on the back of another turtle. And so the king says, well, what does that turtle rest on? And he shakes his head and says, sire, it's turtles all the way down. So a lot of people think that's the kind of the cosmology that the Bible teaches. It's antiquated, it's out of date, we've gone way past the Bible. And I want to read one passage from the Bible reading for today, which is Job 25 through 27. Here is Job speaking, and he says this about God. This is the first book in the Bible, by the way, written even before Genesis. It was written about 1400 BC. This is probably written about 1800 BC. This is what Job says about God. In Job 26, verse 7, he stretches out the north over the void And get ready for this. He hangs the earth on nothing. He hangs the earth on nothing. So according to Job, according to the Bible, the earth is suspended. It's not resting on anything. It's out there in space, just as a modern astronomers tell us the case. We could have known that. We didn't have to wait till 2018 to figure that out. We could have read the book of Job, chapter 26, verse 7. He hangs the earth on nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, do not doubt this book. All right, well, that's it for today. Have a special program. Stay tuned for that. Here's a blessing to take you into your weekend. May the God of peace himself sanctify you completely. May your whole spirit and soul and body be kept blameless at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. He who calls you is faithful. He will surely do it. God bless you. Fighting a winnable war. See you on Monday.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
Hello everyone, I'm Tim Wildmon, President of American Family Association and American Family Radio.